There's a lot of media hype at the moment about what's going on in the cryptocurrency space, mainly around Bitcoin, but we're hearing a lot now about Ether and others in the space. One early adopter of this is George McDonaugh. Now, he's chief executive of Kryptonite1, which is a company which is listed on the NEX exchange, and that company does business within the token space. So George is with us now. We've spoken in another interview about your business and how you interact with blockchain. Sure. and what currencies you use. I want to find a little bit more about you and your early adoption of, in fact, it was at the time Bitcoin, but I know you're in other cryptocurrencies now. How did you start out on this?
Well, it was a sort of, well, now looking back, it was a very fortuitous event in my life. I was given a research project to look at online payments. I was working in the marketing space, and I came across Bitcoin, and I started looking into it very deeply. A big shout out to Andreas Antonopoulos, who so many of us were drawn in by his talks. And I remember very clearly hearing about this thing called the blockchain, and I kind of went into an immediate panic because I thought this was going to take over the world immediately. I mean, if people can transact value with each other anywhere in the world, sort of cross borders, outside of any kind of centralized control, that immediately felt like something that of importance. So I got stuck in. I think I'd given up my job within 4 weeks, and started doing everything I could to learn more. At the time, it was just Bitcoin. Were you mining Bitcoin at that time? Did you start by mining it? No, I didn't. I didn't get into the mining game. Mining is a tricky thing. Very much, you have to sort of got in early and repurposed your profits into more equipment. It's a sort of Moore's law problem. And even then, at that stage in 2011, mining was already a sizable income had to be put into at the time to get a piece of the cake. So no, for me it was far more. So you bought on the open market. It was far more for buying on the open market, and just sort of learning as much as I could. A lot of hours spent in East London in pubs and clubs with lots of people talking about it. And then you graduated from Bitcoin onto other cryptos? Well, what happened then is Litecoin arrived. Litecoin had a different hashing function, so it was far more accessible from a mining perspective. So I did mine that for a bit, and then we had this altcoin explosion where people were making coins because it was open source, so it's very easy to take the code and do lots of interesting things with it. And so we had an explosion of coins, most of them not doing anything particularly different. But out of that initial sort of explosion of experiments, some have retained and some are now very valuable. And most of those ones are sort of in the kind of privacy space, heavily encrypted ones. They did very well. And it was only it was a few years later when Ethereum began to be developed, and that I suppose you could call blockchain 2.0. That's it's very different to Bitcoin. Bitcoin is designed to be very, very strong and do one thing. Ethereum is designed to do a huge array of things, but as such, it has a sort of slightly wider attack surface. So it's still being built now. Yeah, I said you're the chief executive of Kryptonite1, which I think uses the Ether protocol, don't you? Yeah, so we invest in businesses that, generally speaking, are building on that platform. There are others, and there are plenty more coming to the market now. Does this mean that you've pretty much dumped Bitcoin, or do you still trade in Bitcoin personally? We don't trade, no. Personally, do you still hold Bitcoin? Personally, I have a little that keeps me interested. They call it holding onto the train. If you got into these things quite early when they were effectively very cheap, one doesn't imagine they're going to get anywhere near this price. So you buy and sell, and you move on to different projects, and then it's always an aspect of anyone's portfolio, and should be. But yeah, it's. There've been a few in my past. Okay, so you hold Ethereum, presumably? Do you? Ethereum. Ethereum and Bitcoin are sort of payment rails now to some degree, to get into certain projects. There is a very good argument to say just hold them, and you can do very well just holding them. My particular interest is in utility. I believe that gradually over time, it's the decentralized projects that have a distinct utility to them, which is where the value is going to accrue to over time. But Ether is the engine in those projects, so it's a very good hold as well.
Okay, I'm going to go on now briefly to how you see these markets developing. In technical analysis, there's this idea that you get the smart money going in first, then you get institutional money, then you get media interest, then you get a lot more public getting involved, then you get the silly money going in. Whereabouts along the curve do you think we are on the Bitcoin at the moment? I think now we're currently around about just shy of $15,000.
Well, things are certainly beginning to move far quicker than I'd have predicted. I think the institutional money, the sort of the more curious institutional money is beginning to move in. I certainly think some of the more less risk averse institutions are still sitting by the sidelines. It is quite a tricky. It's quite a tricky ecosystem to understand in its entirety, and I think people are just sitting on the sidelines to some degree, just trying to understand why it's important. So I still think there's a long way to go.
Yeah. As I go back to my technical analysis argument, there comes a point when all the longs are exhausted, and all of a sudden, I wouldn't say the bottom falls out of the market, but there is a substantial re-rating and a repricing.
Yeah.
Do you see that happening? I mean, sometime in the near future?
Of course, and it's been going on since the very beginning of Bitcoin. Right. You get this constant movement of this is going to be the next big thing, and then in the early days it was as much as a headline or an article could crash the market. And as it's gained in momentum and as it's gained in liquidity, it's become far more robust against news and so on and so forth. But yes, I think it still has a long way to go. The thing about Bitcoin to some degree is it's not tethered to any. I mean, it has utility, but it's not tethered to a volume of participants or a particular use case like Ethereum. So it's really as much as people are prepared to pay for it, and it does have some really interesting underlying qualities to it.
I believe you hold both Ether and Bitcoin. Is there a point you get out when the current price cycle? I mean, do you see a value where you think you've got to get out and reprice and get back in again?
I'm
asking you here to name a level that you like to.
No, well, I mean, this is the thing. You clearly have to pay attention to market sentiment.
Right.
When things go up, I mean, like you'd say, talk about technical analysis, when things go up exponentially and you just have this gigantic green candle, you know things are going to rebalance simply for the fact that there is a pervasive sense of fear amongst investors that this is going too high too quickly. And I'd imagine that we'll hit many of those. But you have an entire generation, on the internet. We now have a payment system that's endemic to the internet. It's native to it, and it has a quality to it of ownership. This is ours. This is from the internet generation. No one can sort of tell you how to behave with it. It's entirely free for people to use as they wish, and that will send it stratospheric, in my opinion. Okay,
can I peg you to a quote to suggest that perhaps maybe we might see 20,000 in Bitcoin by the end of the year, or I mean that's
Yes, I think we will. I mean, I think there will be, like I say, adjustments.
Yeah.
But I mean, to some degree, it does also depend on what happens in the wider economy. I mean, if we do begin to feel an earthquake of some kind amongst the legacy investment world, so I hear the current stock market's quite high. If Bitcoin is felt as a safe haven, even just a little, then it could see even further adoption.
The jury's out on that, isn't it? Sure. Safe haven, gold, Bitcoin, gold, or Ether, or whatever it is.
Well, I mean,
we've yet to see.
Well, yeah. The one thing you can take away from it is the fact that Bitcoin has been around for 8 or 9 years and has been constantly attacked from every angle,
and it's still
round
there.
the clock, and it's still there. They call it the honey badger, and quite rightly.
George, we'll have to leave it there, but thanks indeed for joining us. It's been a pleasure. George McDonaugh is Chief Executive of Kryptonite1. I did talk to George as well about the company Kryptonite1, and you can find that in another video on the IG video platform.